live button now.
Yeah, we're live. So, is this your first LinkedIn Live?
It's my second. I actually did one with Joel.
Okay, nice,
Yeah,
Joel.
your buddy.
Yeah, Joel. Okay, Joel
Small
is.
world.
He's absolutely amazing.
He was one of my very first kind of friend that I met on LinkedIn, and yeah, we talked. He actually came and did my Instagram live show.
Nice.
3 weeks ago. I wanted to have a segment on recruiters, so he was great.
Okay.
Kind of went through everything recruiters look for on LinkedIn, and even how to kind of optimize your profile to get noticed.
He taught me a lot about recruiting and just in general, and he's just amazing, and it's just crazy. It's just interesting, the power of networking, because you just never know. You never know. Facebook. Okay. You just really never know where it takes you, right? Where networking takes you. You meet so many wonderful people. You meet so many people who are helpful. You learn a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing, that you really learn a lot, that you really I've learned about topics I never would have learned of. And you learn topics that are like not easy to find people. Hey, what's up, Brian Shulman? What's up, Brian Gola? Nice to see you. So yeah, we're getting people. So this is interesting. I already have 17 likes on Facebook because I think I scheduled it. So I think I should schedule
on Facebook?
Yeah, because
I should have given you my Facebook account then, because I'm on Facebook too. Mind you, that's like one of my kind of secondary social platforms for Work Lessons 101. I'm not huge into Facebook anymore. Instagram's kind of where more of my demographics at.
Yeah. I find Instagram you can be more focused. Facebook you just get like friends and all over the place.
You just can't spread yourself too thin. So I picked LinkedIn and Instagram, and I don't regret it, because Instagram, I get so much business in the sense of my newsletter, a lot of like traffic on clients asking for career coaching, stuff like that. I get that so much more on Instagram than I get that for a bit, but I get the more the younger generation on Instagram.
I need to really step up my Instagram game. But again,
it's hard though. It's so competitive. I spent so much time on Instagram last year.
It's just one of those things where you want to make sure, because even LinkedIn, like my messages take like hours. Now I actually ignore some messages. I feel bad, but
we talked about this. I'm really picky with who I work with. So
yeah, but I mean,
that's
if someone
why
just says
partly doing the book so they can have access to all the information that I have.
Yeah,
but I just when you're limited with your time, it's not that impersonal, and always reach out to me. I always answer client inquiries 100% on.
Yeah.
But people who are just like hi, or just the basic questions that you can answer by going to my profile. I don't reply to those anymore. Just simply because I don't. It's not.
Yeah.
You need to make an effort for me to make an effort.
I agree. Hey, Diana. Hey, Usama. Hey, Alvin. Thank you. What are your thoughts on TikTok? Again, it's just one of those things. You gotta really invest the time. I mean, I see some people being really creative, and you can do a lot of different topics. But again,
TikTok?
It's really, I've seen people even have Excel. Like I've seen people have like careers, things that are focused on certain areas, but again, you gotta like be funny and engaging.
TikTok might be my next platform I take on now that I'm established on LinkedIn and Instagram, that I can add a third. But now with all the potential it being banned, I don't know. There's a lot of people that have like 60, 70,000 followers on TikTok that spent a lot of time just to have it banned.
Yeah, that would be pretty bad.
But you gotta diversify. But as I say, always pick two platforms. Have a reason for. So Instagram, I did to connect with the Gen Zs, which is my demographic, that kind of new professional entering the work environment, so I can coach them. And then LinkedIn, obviously, because it is still the career centered. I don't even like. It is technically social media, but it's the one. It's the one
professional.
It's the one. There's not another platform like TikTok or YouTube. Like there's even Instagram can compete technically with TikTok because of stories, and Instagram stories killed Vine. So there's a more competitive world there, and TikTok is all video based. So whereas Instagram's still imagery, and obviously it has the video element. So, but I still do imagery. Like that's how I post everything on LinkedIn, is with a quote or an image. Which doesn't work as well on LinkedIn, so I'm slowly moving more into just text posts. I just get so much better engagement on the photos, though.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Everybody has something different. I mean, so what inspired you? So your book just came out. It's called Work Lessons 101. What sort of inspired you for it?
So I work for everyone who doesn't know me or not familiar with Work Lessons 101. So Work Lessons 101 is also my company name, and the book's Work Lessons 101, and the subtitle is What They Don't Teach You in School. And I mentor a lot of young employees in the corporate world. So I've worked in the Fortune 500 world for 14 years now and still work. That's my day job. And now that as a project manager, I work in the engineering construction, so I'm also a female in a completely male-dominated industry. So I do understand what it is to be a minority in an environment that is predominantly not you. So about 3 years ago, I just hit a crossroads in my career. I was in project management for a few years at that point, and was working in the energy and chemical world. So, I had big pipeline clients, and it was just a really stressful work. And it to this day is stressful in a good way. Like, it's not necessarily, some days are tiring and it's work for a reason, but generally I enjoy what I do, but I wasn't getting that like day-to-day mentorship when I entered project management, because you're working more with clients, you're working with older people. I just wasn't getting that hands-on day-to-day mentorship that I want. I love. It's like a passion of myself. Yeah. Like, I wasn't getting that when I left the engineering side of the business. I got day-to-day interaction with new grads or new employees right out of school. I got to do a lot of coaching and mentoring. And when I moved into management, it just got highly reduced, and just wasn't feeling that day-to-day fulfillment from my work. I felt a lot more tired. It was also moving to 60, 70-hour weeks. So, it kicks your spare time to say tutor on the weekends like I used to and stuff like that. So I actually decided to start a side business. I started writing a book way back a few years back. And last year I became a mother, and I decided I took a year off to be on maternity leave. And I thought, you know what? So finally I have a year off to take care of my child. It's not a year off, but a different away from my corporate responsibilities. And I said, that's it. I'm going to launch Work Lessons 101, and I'm going to write a book, and I'm going to start a business and see kind of where it went. So I started with a fairly I would say one of the big lessons I learned on the last year is actually think bigger. I actually thought, I'll just build an audience and I'll write a book, and that's that. So within 1 year, it's like I already offer like a full-fledged of services. This coming few months, I'm going to start releasing my programs and workshops and speaking engagements. And so the book was kind of just ended up being step one of a much larger plan, which I didn't have a year ago. So it teaches anybody who's watching to don't limit yourself, because it's, just, have a goal, and then that goal tends to torpedo into these bigger things, which is awesome. But I just wrote the book and started the business because I felt there was a big gap in the industry, from education to being practical to the work environment, especially the corporate world. A lot of the new grads I work with just don't know how to maneuver politics and don't know how to build a network and how to pick battles wisely. Like they're taught now, and I'm kind of torn. I love the fact that the world is moving into this more civil rights, more protecting minority mindset. Being a minority in my industry, I'm for it 100%. But it has given them an illusion that their opinion is more significant than it is in the work environment. And I think everyone needs to be themselves and be authentic, but you still always need to curb your personality within a professional environment. Because, face it, people who invest billions of dollars into a company, there's a standard of working, and they don't. I've seen quite a few blunders, or people speak up when they should shut up or stay silent, and these just common sense things, and they don't know how to maneuver and how to handle themselves, especially in confrontation, where you need to stick up for yourself, but at the same time be professional. It's not there's no one set piece of advice that works for all situations. Everyone's be yourself. That could be absolutely horrible advice if your true self is wearing a hoodie and jeans with holes in them, and your $1 billion client sitting in the room in a suit and tie. There's not a connection there. That's just a very basic example, but then add do you swear in front of like you like these little common sense things like one off can, you know, especially if it's an internal meeting, you'll be protected. Like I'll always coach my new grads. And I'm someone who's super direct and blunt. So I've taken new grads to like really important critical meetings that no one else will, but I tell them beforehand that they have to sit there and shut up under no circumstance, unless they're directly spoken to, or they'll have to talk. And because they don't understand that there's always a bigger game at play. Sometimes I want a meeting to get heated. Sometimes I want something to go a certain way because I have a plan in the back of my head. And if you interrupt it because you think you know better, you've completely squashed my plan. And unless you know that going in, and sometimes you have to change these tactics right on the spot. And this is where experience comes in. This is where mentorship comes in. This is why I'm taking you to the meeting so you can learn this, but don't hurt your chances because no one will ever take you again. And so this is kind of how you move up, and especially in the corporate world, kind of when someone takes you under their, don't mess it up. And a lot mess it up because they're kind of taught these things in school or their upbringing that are just not practical in the real world.
What are some common mistakes that you see a lot of younger professionals make?
Selling themselves is the first one. So let's talk about entry level to maybe slightly intermediate. Biggest one, selling themselves. I work on resumes for fun because I'm good at it and I really enjoy it. And new grad after new grad, I see they talk in their resumes, for example, like you and I are talking. And, you know, and it's just not an excuse now. There's so much information out there that you shouldn't be making these rookie blunders. This shows me that you haven't put any effort in it. And I don't want to be too judgmental because I don't know if you did. I'm not sure if you did a formal degree, but I can assure you my formal degree, no one ever taught me how to write a resume.
No, unfortunately, I do have a master's degree.
Okay, so you're highly educated too. So, but no one told me how to prep for an interview. I actually did co-op too, which is like a Canadian version of an internship. And you know, there was like an extra like thing I could sign up for to get an interview prep, but that was it. That was like completely all on my own and outside of my academic credit. So that's the first one. They don't know how to sell their credentials. I would say that's a big one. And then the next one, once they get into the door, is they don't know how to like learn the organization's culture. So company culture is actually not that complicated. If you're trying to solve a bad company culture, that's complicated. But if you're just someone walking in the door, it's not that hard. It's the personality of the company. It should jump right at you. So there's a lot of companies that preach versus what they practice. So I call them the unwritten rules. I have an entire chapter on it in my book because it is something they don't teach you. And there's people that are 10 years in a career that don't think their company has unwritten rules. Like they're absolutely oblivious to the existence of them. And I can assure you, even the best companies and the best cultures and the best work environments in the world have some form of an unwritten rule. And that's what they preach versus what they do, right? It's words versus actions. And every company has them to some degree. Classic ones, open door policy. I've seen younger people like week 2, these are a bit of like far examples. But like try to email the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Oh man.
Like a CEO has like 60, 80, like think of Amazon, it doesn't have like 400,000 employees. Like, so someone's going to try to, email Jeff Bezos about their idea. Like, not smart and not an idea means nothing. That's another thing.
Only have one, if you're emailing Jeff Bezos, you only have one shot, and that email has to be crafted in such a way, and the idea has to be like, okay, you know what, you got my attention. So, and
you better not be just going with him with an idea. You better be going with an implementation plan that's proven and a hell of a lot of supporters. So I always talk to these new grads. They're like, so and so, my friend, he just went up the ladder. Like he didn't earn it. He just got it. And I was like, are you sure he didn't earn it? Do you know all the variables that went into his promotions? You probably don't. There's always stuff you'll never know. But I'm like, who does he network with? Where does he spend his time? Because what a lot of people don't do, like the people who are like working down and put their head down and work really hard. I see this a little bit more with introverts. And they're like, oh, someone's going to notice. They only notice if you're under good leadership. If you're not under good leadership, you may not be noticed, and might be pigeonholed actually as a result because your bad boss doesn't want to lose you. Under great leadership, talent typically gets recognized almost under all circumstances. But let's just face it, great leadership is rare, and it does not exist in a good chunk of Fortune 500 world. So you got to bring in that little bit of common sense of how to get noticed. And that means you need to network with people that are going to help you. And that's influencers, because you're not going to have access to decision makers or major VPs your first day, unless it's a complete fluke and you happen to work for one, which is really rare. So if you're just an entry-level person working in a department that's under like 100 different departments, and there's like 3,000 people in your department, and you're like, yeah, you need to have a plan to be that red, that red stain on the white shirt that stands out. But you want to stand out in a good way. So you need to make sure of what you do to be visible, you're going to excel at and knock it out of the park, right? So just become invisible there's like other variables to being visible. You got to succeed too. And you need to make sure you get credit for your work. So there's all these steps, and no one understands it. It all starts with understanding the unwritten rules, because if you don't understand an unwritten rule and then you go and break one, you're screwed. You're not screwed. You can recover, but you just hit a major blender, which could have been avoided. You don't break unless you're somebody like an off-limit person, and they exist too. That's another unwritten rule. If you're an off-limit person, you're special. But if you're like us mere mortals who need to like kind of work the game and play the game, you need to establish who you are first, and that's building your credibility. And this is long game. So your friend may have got lucky, or the timing worked in their favor, may have. But generally what I've seen with the people who do the zigzag up really quickly is they are really good at picking up people who are going to help them, the influencers and the people that are going to push them forward. Because what you need is your name dropped in rooms that you're not in by people that are important and who have influence and can pull strings to get you where you need to go. And you need to start picking out who those people are. And if you don't have access to any of those people, then you need to find out who's in their inner circles, and you got to work your way in. You got to get like that little pinky toe in the door, and that takes time. And don't rush it. If you want to do it right, it takes time. Get that credibility while you're doing that. Build those skill sets, because once you get into those doors, if you don't have any skills, you're not going to be in there for very long. You're going to get tossed out.
So what do you mean by influence? So what is a workplace influencer? Like, how would you categorize that?
Someone who has access to influence in something. So you're going to email Jim Benzo with an idea. Well, hopefully you've shopped the idea around and got a bunch of feedback of what people would like and don't like. So an influencer is typically someone who has an access to a decision maker. They can be the same person. Generally, they're not. Lots of decision makers have no respect. They got where they are through different methods that you may or may never find out. Just because they have a title doesn't mean they have influence, is all I'm trying to say. They might have both. But lots of times influencers are they're not on the org charts. They're the inner circle of the people who can help you. So they're the people those people trust. So generally you start to build your own inner circle with your peers, right? When you start entering. So you associate yourself with really ambitious, intelligent people maybe a few years ahead of you that have the career path you want. Find out how they got to where they are, learn their rules, and either see if you can mimic it, take some of it, and then make it unique for your situation. So influencers could be an administrator to a major decision maker. It's the gatekeeper. You want to get into someone's schedule, you got to go through the gatekeeper. That could be an influencer potentially, because a lot of administrators have worked with their leader potentially for a decade. They could be considered family in that eyes, but they don't have a title, is what I'm trying to say. So an influencer is kind of those connecting people who can persuade someone to go with you. So like, for example, I got nominated for an Edison Award during my career. So a Women in Innovation campaign. And everyone thinks the head of innovation chose me at my company, and he didn't. It was his people who worked for him that did. So they had access. He had to approve it, but he had nothing to do with it, is my whole point. At the end of the day, he just signed. And all the people who's like, oh no, she'd be perfect for it because of this, this, and this, that's an influencer. That is someone, when you're entry level in your career, or within the first 10 years of your career, and you're really working your way up into management roles or into vice presidents, where you have a large teams and leading teams, this is where you go. This is how you get in, is you make and impress some of the people that work for these people who can actually if you can go, because you still need to get the promotions from your direct leaders, right? So you got to be careful in the organization that you don't connect yourself too high up too quickly, because then that could create jealousy and issues with other people, especially if it's too visible, right? So you always got to be a little careful with the side stuff. But at the end of the day, you just want to build your network of people that are smart, ambitious, share similar goals to you, that have networks themselves, because once you're in someone else's network, you have access to their network, and that's how you create the web of networking. And this is what they don't teach you in school. They don't teach you how a network works. They just say, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's like the worst advice ever, because what you know is damn well important, because I met people that have no knowledge and they get promoted too quickly, and they go into these rooms, they go like present in front of the board of directors, and they fall on their ass because they don't know anything. They got into the room, but they didn't get to keep their seat at the table because they don't bring anything to the table. So, like reputation can help you so far, but you need credibility at some point. So I hate that saying, like, what you know.
You know what I think? I think the saying should be corrected to, it's what you know multiplied by who you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because they're multiplying factors. Because if you know nothing, you need to know the CEO to get to where you want, right? And then it's a balancing act. But people who get to good places and they know a lot and they know the right people, it really jumpstarts their careers, right? It takes them to where they deserve to be.
In huge organizations, you're not going to have access to a CEO unless it's, again, a fluke. Middle companies and smaller companies, like there's lots of companies that only have like 20 employees. Everyone, it's a very flat organization. But in the big Fortune 500 companies, they tend to have hierarchy based, because it's almost impossible not to control the company in a flat org chart when you have 60, 70, 80, 100,000 employees that spans like 40, 60 different countries. It's almost impossible. And that's where a lot of people get overwhelmed. They're at I always when I work with my clients, they're at the base of the mountain and they're looking up at Everest and they're like, how do I climb this? Well, work your way backwards. See yourself at the peak and work back. It's like a puzzle. You do the border first. You you look at the box, you have an idea of the image, and then you start putting the pieces together. That's how your career development plan works. It's another thing they don't teach you in school. Career development plan, goal setting, like tangible goal setting. I have a whole chapter 2 on goal setting. It's one of the underlying themes of the book, because if you don't have goals, you don't go anywhere. So, and how to recover when your goals don't work out or your goals take on a world of their own. Because what happened? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, what are some, like, you mentioned goals. Do you kind of want to just talk about like little bits on each chapter of the book? So what you mentioned,
there's
goals.
So there's like 50 chapters. It's one of, so it kind of almost goes in the progression of your career to some degree. So the goal setting chapter is quite early in the book. It's chapter 7. Goals. So if you're entry level or you're fairly new in your career, or you're doing a career change, your goals, you're not starting over with a career change. There's lots of skills that are transferable, or you're doing a pivot, right? But if you're kind of starting again, building your credibility and your skill sets, you're starting not necessarily at the bottom again, but you're starting earlier in your career, right? And once you have experience, you can probably pivot a lot quicker up wherever you're going, because you know kind of the game. But goal setting, if you're entering your career for the first time, right out of school, you need to have really good detailed short-term goals that feed a long-term vision. Everyone's like, what's your 10-year goal? I think that's the stupidest question to ask in an interview to a 22-year-old, because what do they know about their career? Like, we already talked about what school doesn't teach. So they might have an unrealistic goal. Like in my industry, if you want to be a department manager, or that could take 10 years, and a vice president, to get to a vice president level, could take 15 years, is like super, like you're a superstar. So about 20 years probably, if you ever make it. It's like the top 1% at that point, right? So the finance industry is a lot more. You might be 5 years in your career when you become a VP, but there's way more VPs in that industry. So all relative, right? So you pick these really, really detailed, and they don't have to be a goal on a title. They could be like skills. Where do you want to be in 2 years, and what skills do you want to collect, and who do you want in your network? So, because part of my goal setting with my clients is I always have a portion of who they need to network with to get to those goals, especially if they're ambitious goals. They almost have to schedule in networking into their day-to-day life, so they never oversee it, because mentorship is one of my core values. But when you're working on a bid for $1 billion proposal that people's jobs are on on the hook for. Day to day, that's the more important task, right? But if you always neglect mentoring or networking, it'll never get done. And you'll never have a successor if you don't mentor, and you'll never have a strong network or an influential network if you don't network, if you don't make time for it. So I always break everything down to actionable steps. Okay, I want to be here in 2 years. Okay, who in the company is going to get me into that role? And then I start creating a list of names and titles and people. And then you're like, okay, so that person's like way ahead of me. I have no way of getting it. Who in my network knows that person? Okay, all right. So no one in my network knows that person. Okay, so I have to make it literally a connection to their network. Who do they eat lunch with? Who do they spend their time with? Who in my age bracket or level in the organization roughly knows them? Who can I find out information? So if you're going to pitch that idea, like we talked about earlier, to Jeff Bezos, this is how I would approach it. I have a brilliant idea, which means nothing, because it doesn't mean it's profitable. It doesn't mean it's, so scrap the idea that idea means. It's a great start, but you need to make it practical. If you don't know how to make it practical, you need to recruit people to teach you. And then, so that's it. That's how you break it down. I'm an engineer, so everything is a system. Everything is a step. So do, and everything's connected. So you might have overlapping steps. So early in your career, you're building your network at the same time you're building your skill sets in your network. So, because you can't wait till you're already established to build your network. It's too late at the point, because that's at the point you actually need a network. So you need to like start doing these things concurrently. And if you don't make time for them in an effort, so I always say on LinkedIn, if you want to build connections, well, do some research. Pick 3 people a week in the industry that you either want to pursue or the roles you want to go into or organizations you potentially want to be into, and just start Googling. Find people that work at the same entry level. See if they post content. And if they post content, start commenting on it. Once you kind of like their content for a little while, send them a personalized invitation. They'll accept. And then once you have a connection through email, reach out to them with a nice introductory email. And then start, I see you wrote this piece on this content. Is there anything you could actually, piece of advice you could do here? Or have you ever done this? And if you're a content creator, like I'm a content creator, then I start to collaborate. And then they get, like, kind of you and I a bit that way. Like, you came into my Instagram live show, and we had very similar themes and content, but different. So we have different audiences. So once you collaborate with those people, then you have access to their audience and they have access to you. So that's how it works. And everyone's kind of like, well, I have to have Jeff Bezos in my back corner to be successful at Amazon. Well, you probably don't. He's so busy.
Yeah.
Like, why would he care about your opinion yet? You need to first prove yourself to get to him. And you may never get to him, but you may never need to get to him, depending on what your goals are and your ambitions. But an idea is a start, making it profitable, making it implementable, getting the supporters. As I said, that example of like, oh, my friend keeps getting promoted, but I'm not. Who is he working? So when you're going to go pitch this novel idea that's going to save millions of dollars for your company, you got to understand that people don't like change, that the natural thing for people is to push something unfamiliar away. So you going into that room cold and no one in that room understands what you're going to talk about, and they're going to be hearing it for the very first time, is not a good situation to get a yes. So what you're going to need to do is find out who's going to be in that room, and that's where the influencers come in. Who can go mention your name and mention your idea to them 2 weeks in advance, because then they're honest. Oh, that's never going to work. Then your little influencer friend's going to be like, well, why don't you think it's going to work? Because it's so and so. Okay, that information is priceless. If you have access to that, then you're going to go back to your presentation, back to your implementation report, and you're going to address each one of those questions in it. And if that keeps happening, then you keep doing it. And that meeting, if you went in cold, would be a hostile meeting. You would never get your pitch out the door, because everyone would start interrupting you, saying it's not going to work. And then you're going to be on defense, and you're going to go, and the whole meeting's lost at that point. Unless you're literally that experienced where you know how to pick that, you know how to turn a hostile situation. These are 10-year things in your career. I would never expect a new grad, and I would never put a new grad into a situation that I thought would be hostile. I put myself in front of there to take the bullets with their support. And that's what a leader does. But in general, a lot of times that doesn't happen, because there's a lot of time middle management doesn't have strong leaders. Top of organizations might, but it's a huge organization. There's just that's where from my experience in coaching, it's that middle management is really, really hard. So if you have to get past middle management, you got to be really prepared in advance. You need to get these bullets out the door. So if you can find that information ahead of time and then put this amazing presentation together, where the beginning of the presentation is basically getting them their defense down. It's like, you guys might be thinking this, and then half the room's like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. This is why I think it should be worked this way. And then you disarm them. And then all of a sudden they start to listen. The biggest thing is people immediately feel uncomfortable, is to push you out the door. Because I can assure you, in the corporate world, VPs don't question that they're in the wrong, generally.
Yeah.
You're in the wrong, not them. They don't have that way of thinking that they're like, oh, maybe I'm the one who needs to change. They don't think like that. So you need to think of the what if scenarios, but that information, that's why I say influencers are the most powerful members of a network, because they, just think of you cold calling someone on the phone or you being recommended first beforehand. What scenario will have a likely yes and a likely sale? This is networking. This is why it's one of the most critical variables in a successful career. It is not the only one. It complements it. So again, I've seen people that have this fake reputation. They self-promote all the time. Everyone thinks they're great. They have this network that thinks they're important, and then they finally get into a position and then they fall miserably on their butt because they don't actually have the skill sets or the followers behind them to execute the work, because they've always looked ahead and not behind. So the corporate kiss up who goes up the ladder quickly, they're absolutely hated in their own generation, like their own age bracket, not respected. And people are like, oh, they got there before me, so they must be doing something right. Their story's not over yet. I've seen a lot of them at like year 20, year 15 get kicked out of the company because
you have to make friends.
All the people who promoted them are now retired, and their own age bracket hates them because they're not respected, because they actually don't know anything, or they don't know enough. They can't compete with the people who did the work. Everyone caught up at one point, right? So there are people who like leapfrog, but this is what they don't teach you in school. Leapfrogging isn't always the right thing. I'm an engineer, so I'm a project manager now. If I didn't do engineering, how would I understand a schedule or a budget? That's what saves money is condensing the schedule and knocking out hours that you reimburse by the client. That makes their project cheaper. But if I don't understand how to engineer the deliverables out the door, or how long it takes things to do a solid design, and I just blankly cut a schedule, sell that to a client, and then I can't deliver on it, there goes my reputation. And there goes the support from my team who can bail me out because I screwed them over in the process of doing it. So it's all relative, right? You need to have that credibility. So the biggest thing I always say with the youngsters who are so ambitious, well, A, why do you want the role? Make sure it's just not your ego kind of getting the best of you with the title and the money. Because the money's great. I have to admit, I have a really good job, and the money helps me and gives me flexibility in my life, and it pays for, I live in one of the most expensive cities in the world, and it helps pay the mortgage. But there's also a lot of sacrifice. The company phone that they give you, they can call at all hours, weekends, When I worked in corporate business development, I worked many, many, many weekends. There's a reason I don't work in it now, because it's huge sacrifice. And in my business, a lot of people in business development go to the top, and they've earned it, but they're willing to sacrifice certain things that I'm not. So if you're competing against your peers, make sure that your goals are aligned with them, because if your peer truly wants to be a CEO and you want to be in middle management, you can't compare your progress to them. It will only depress you and hurt you, because you're just simply not willing to sacrifice what they are. And that's fine. That's okay. Don't be like that. You chasing other people's dreams or comparing yourself is like, one of my favorite quotes is from Theodore Roosevelt, is the comparison's the theft of joy. So stick to your plans, stick to your goals, learn from your friends. This is where networking comes in. Learn from them, because some of my best mentors in my career, early in my career, were all peers. They're all people who were slightly more ambitious than me and slightly more mature. They kind of like knew the game before I ever knew the game. and they helped me. They kind of taught me how to get in front of the management team and impress them. They kind of did that by like, oh, you know, like you need to get in front of them. And how I did it was I took on portfolio assignments, like volunteer experience and stuff. That's actually how I got my first bit of leadership under me too. Like I ran the United Way campaign like a few years into my career, and I had a team of 40 volunteers over a 6-month period of time. And we raised over $600,000 for charity. So, you know, it doesn't mean anything from a profitable standpoint, but I had to do a biweekly report in front of all our senior leadership team. So every 2 weeks I got to present our progress to them, and that got me in front of them. And, you know, the first couple times you're nervous. After that, you get so good. It's about being comfortable in the room with those types of people too, right? And understanding the questions they're going to ask so you can better prepare. And if I didn't do well, no one would really care because it wasn't profitable work. So, you know, that's where you can kind of fail safely too, right? Those are like the ideal situations. So if you really want to impress people, find those little portfolio assignments that you can put your name forward to and build that confidence and build that leadership and build that time in front of those people. Because I find you need about three times in front of people for them to remember who you are. And it needs to be in a somewhat short period of time, right? If they meet me 1 year and they don't see me again for another 2 years, then you're back to zero, right? They don't remember you. So,
yeah, that's the truth.
Unless they're real leaders. Like I remember our head of HR, I shared like a 1 minute elevator ride with him. And then I bumped into him again 5-6 months later, and he remembered every word of the conversation and my name. And like, yeah, I was like,
that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah,
so what's some things that young professionals should really do? So obviously you need to, you know, start networking, start the influencer, kind of know your place in the organization. What's something else that it's really important?
Okay, so you want to be likable, and so yeah, that's like big. So let's talk about being likable.
Yeah.
So you want to have an opinion. You don't want to be no sheep. Okay. You want to be something that brings something unique. So you need to bring your authentic self. You need to curb your personality when you need to. So you need to learn these situations, and part of that is learning to pick your battles wisely. So dress code, don't bother. Yeah. Regardless of how stupid it is and how dated it is, don't bother. It's a stupid argument. Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
Pick smart arguments. Learn to stick up for yourself. So, and don't also be too hard on yourself if you kind of blew it. So, like my first few times, I went to a construction site in Mongolia just a few years in my career. I was the youngest person there. I was the only female engineer for 9 months, to give you an idea. And I'm an engineer, so construction people generally don't like engineers.
Yeah.
Because they're all like the hands-on experience versus the school smarts, right?
Yeah.
Classic. So I got it. And I kind of understood at first that I'm like, my education doesn't mean crap here. That's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm here to learn, and I'm here. And for the first few months, it was really rough. I got kind of teased, and I got, you know, I just, you know, I had to prove myself. Like I had all these things against me, even though some of them weren't my fault, like being female, like, you know, because people are like, well, that's sexism. It might be, but it's not like they're like blatantly obvious with their comments, right? And you're also in the middle of the third world. You know, there's different labor right laws there. So you're like, it's not that. Yeah, I could report them. Sure. And maybe win something against HR. They didn't do anything that actually made me uncomfortable. Be like, you need to draw that line of what's unacceptable and what isn't. But I'm the newbie. I need to prove myself. And that's how I approached it. And every day I went out in the field and be like, give me some work. Because at first they wouldn't give me anything like a real responsibility. And I asked every single day. And at like month 8, I finally got my chance to prove myself. One of these systems just broke. And this is where, so through that whole 8 months, I was friendly. I didn't alienate. I picked my battles. Don't get me wrong. I picked my battles. There's people who definitely crossed my line, and I put them on the spot. So I was by no means an easy target. I stuck up for myself. But at 8 months, I had that. But if I didn't work those battles in the 8 months and ask for work every single day and go and have beers with the guys after work and get to know them, when this system broke down, I would have had no one to call me. I am not an electrical engineer. I'm a metallurgist. So I understand like how to turn rock into metal. I understand the process to do that. But the fact that a pump won't run because the electric cabinet's broken, like I have no idea how to solve that problem. So I called the electrician up. He came. Okay, this part was broken. So I called the mechanic, like these, and that's it. And then as a team, we were able to solve it and get it up. It was like a perfect storm because at the same time, the government officials from Mongolia were going to come to site to make sure we had an operating system. And it was broken at the time. And they were like coming in 48 hours. So the client was like at my door being like, because if they lost their permit, you're talking about like 1 month, our clients could lose like $200 million in profit. Like you're not talking about like a couple $1,000s. You're talking so they were at my door. I'm 29 years old. I'm not someone who should be like running, but this, I volunteered for it. I got it. And then this happened after. So I said, yes. And then it all went wrong after I committed. No one knew it was going to go wrong. So it was like one of those things that you could run away or just say, I can't do it. Or you say, you know what, I'm going to try because we're going to try. And in 48 hours between the people I called, the people that came in and helped me, completely, I was promoted immediately after this. I actually got a different, I was kind of like in this crappy part of the camp. And then they moved me and put me in like a really good part of the camp where I got like my own barbecue and and everyone, you could be like, who are those people who get those barbecues? Now that I went through that whole experience, well, I freaking earned it because I didn't sleep for like 3 days straight. So it's like, yeah. And I made like a zillion phone calls and I literally had to send someone to China to pick up a spare part and fly them back. So you're like, because like the Gobi Desert's like a 16-week turnaround to get stuff. So we literally flew people to go pick up the pieces that broke and brought them back to site. Wow. So you needed to be like, like you needed to be like fully dedicated and go. And so some people, like anybody who's not aware of like all these like little itty bitty, because I didn't promote this, like I'm in quicksand. Hey, I'm just trying to keep above, not drown here. And all these people are helping me. So there's things you can do. So it worked. We passed the test with the government. Everything was awesome. So I could have done two things at this point. Take my beautiful little, like nice little place that I got put in camp and be like, yeah, I'm with the client now. Or you can thank everyone. So the very first thing I did was host a party for everyone that helped me and just say thank you. Because like at the end of the day, I didn't actually do anything. It was like everybody else who solved my problem. What I did was organizing and let it. And so this is at the end of the day, you can be like, yeah, I'm wicked. I'm a hot shot. And let it go to your head. And that just shows everybody your true character. Because I always say great failure and great success show you who you are. And you could do that. And I wouldn't personally, because careers are decades. They're the marathon. If you want to like celebrate a sprint, good for you. You're going to be at the bottom in 2 years if you're not careful. It's all short-lived. You're only as good as your last result. And so if you just decide to like stay comfortable and put your feet up, great. That's where you need to be practical and don't worry and ask for help. They don't teach you. So many people think asking for help is like a negative where you're like, oh my God, it's so not. Our projects are so big, a team builds it. There's not one person that deserves all the credit. Never. And if someone thinks that, then they're not a leader and they're just not someone that's respected and you want in your network. They don't see the big picture. It eludes them, and you probably can't ever change the mind. So that's not a smart battle to go against. Some people are like, I hate to say it, some people are write-offs. Like they're just not worth your time. And if there's some people that I worked in my career that just don't think women have a right to be at a construction site. They're the minority, very few, thank God. But that's the way they think. And regardless of what I do, that's not going to change it. So I don't give a shit what they think. Just don't. You just like, don't. They try anything with me, you stick up for yourself, but you're like, there's just no way you're going to, that ends up being one of your bosses. There's no way to change their opinion. You need to leave. You need to move around them, burn a bridge. You need to call in your network for a favor. So a lot of people waste a lot of time, especially early in their career, on trying to impress the wrong people and trying to win everyone over. And if you're a person of true integrity and a person of strength, where you have an opinion and you know things are wrong and you're willing to fight for what's right, there will always be people who don't like you. And, if some of them's your boss or some of them's like really like huge people, that's where you gotta play the game a bit, because having people like you is powerful. So sometimes you got to play the double-edged sword, which you're nice to people. You're like, yeah, but you don't necessarily respect them, but they don't need to know that. You know what? Like, they don't need to know that. You don't need to go bash them either, because a lot of bad bosses are bad bosses because their organizations don't train them and don't help them. So they're not bad bosses because they want to be, or because they're a narcissist or have a bad personality. They're bad bosses because they're inequipped or been promoted too quickly. So maybe your job's to help them because they're not bad people. Maybe instead of being that person on the team that vents and picks on them, maybe be that person that helps them, especially if they're a good person, because if they get promoted, then you're the first person they're going to take with you. Like, this is why you need a network, because like your peers, once you get to a certain level in an organization, do you ever wonder why like a bunch of people go up together? It's because when you're like a head of like a major group at a big corporation, the first thing you do is put people you trust into critical roles that can do the work. Like, you have to understand, in an organization, there's always 10 people that are qualified to do a role. So why that one person over that person? Yes, a bit of luck and a bit of timing, but it's networking too. And it's people who built that trust in that network together. And so the more people you can do that with, the more likable you are, the less you alienate people. Learn when to keep your mouth shut and never talk trash about people. Like, gossip sinks ships, including your own. So don't, a lot of people play that nitty gritty politics game in corporations. I don't have any time for it, because I think it's dangerous, because you don't know what's going to happen in the future. If you don't respect someone, then don't work for them. That's one thing. You do not have to go and let everyone know you don't like them and trash them. You do not need to do that. That shows more about your character than theirs. Don't stoop yourself to their level, because what if they ever become your boss? What if you actually find out that something that you thought about them was wrong? Like, they had a rumor against them that like tarnished their reputation, and it ended up not being true, but you believed it. It can happen to you too. So like, you got to be really careful. That's why I just don't play it. Like, I almost win the game by not playing that game. So you just gotta give people sometimes benefit of the doubt. And if you can't give them the benefit of the doubt, just understand that there's two sides to every story, and you might not have access to information. So just stay out of it. And one of the things I coach my clients are like, well, people talk about all this stuff when I'm around. You can listen. Knowledge is always powerful. Information is always useful sometimes. So you can listen, but if someone asks for your opinion, you can politely say the conversation makes you feel uncomfortable and switch the topic. Like, you don't need to feel pressure in doing stuff that you don't want to do. And if that's the gossip mill, then stay out of it. I have seen people succeed extremely high in their career that do not partake in that. Like, they, you know what? One of them in particular, I trust him with my life. Like, he is just not, if he says something to me, I take it to the bank, because I just know he doesn't partake in any of that dirtiness. So you're just, and he made it. So you don't need to, I rub your back, you rub your back. You don't have to play that game if you don't want to. There's definitely ways to get to success. And the one thing that's the advantage is everyone tends to like you, because you're trustworthy. And so you got to be very, very careful. Reputation needs to be protected. So if you're visible to your organization, and your successes are known, you have to self-promote a bit, but always do it tastefully. And you're kind of that known person, and you don't partake with the other crap, you don't have as many enemies. You always get people who are jealous, especially if you're really good, because they're threatened by you. But if you protect your reputation, have a strong network behind you, you're not an easy target to go after for defamation or sabotage, because, let's face it, you're too high up and you're too connected. So I always teach people,
What are some other things that what are some things that you see a lot of young professionals do right nowadays?
Oh man, they're so ambitious. Like, the energy. So I love working with youth because of their optimism. I know that annoys some people, but I love it. They might be naive or green, but I love it. I'm not one to ever trash someone's dreams. So they're willing to do the work, and I will help them 100% of my ability. So I find the younger generation very tuned in. Like, they might be a little naive, but I was naive at 22 too. Yeah. Sometimes they're just optimistic. It's not even naive. They're just, life hasn't been too hard on them yet. life takes its toll. Some people have it harder than others.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, now, who did you write the book for? Right? Like, who would you say? Did you write it for young professionals, mid professionals, or just someone who really just needs everything broken down to them?
someone that needs things broken down, but I would say the targeted age brackets, 18 to 34. So, but I've met so many baby boomers that read this stuff that'd be like, I wish I knew this for my career, right? So I always say, people, if you're at a level in your career, say you're 15 years in your career, you're at where I'm at, but you're not at the role or the position you feel you've earned and you don't know why. I think my book might be able to help you in that sense, because I talk quite a bit about reputation management and how to build your credibility. So I always find a lot of people who are really credible people, but they're struggling to get promoted. It's because they haven't developed the network and their name to sell, right? So they don't know how to build a sellable name, and they don't, they're maybe too shy, and they have to find the elements that they're comfortable with. Like, some of the best leaders I've ever worked for are introverts. So, they might not want to like ask a question in an auditorium full of people, and some do. You just need to work yourself up. So I'm a massive extrovert, and I understand that it came a lot easier to network for me than it does for some people. But you still got to break it down to actionable things. So if you have a fear of public speaking, that's going to hurt you in your career the higher you go up, because no matter what you do, you're going to have to speak to some degree in front of people, and you need to sell yourself, which is part of it. That's still part of public speaking. So it's might not hold you back in the first few years of your career, but over the course of your career, it will hold you back. You need to get over it. And the earlier you can get over it, the more you'll build your confidence, and the more you can benefit it over the course of your career. So get over it. Do something about it. Start small. Don't start asking a question in front of an auditorium. Start asking a question by yourself in front of a mirror at home. So there's a big presentation coming up on your project. It's going to have 10 people in the room, 20 people in the room. You kind of know the topic. Have 4 preset questions already advanced. Practice at home, in front of a mirror, in front of your parents, in front of a small group of people that you trust. Get feedback about how to better phrase it. Practice and practice it till you can do it in your sleep. And then do with all 4 questions. And then as the presentation goes, the person might actually cover a couple of the questions in it, or a better question might pop into your head. But then at the end, when they ask for questions, generally there's this like silence rate at the beginning. If you could be the first person to stand up in front of that mic and ask a question, you got everyone's attention looking at you. And then the more and more you do this, the better your questions will become. You'll refine them and become better at it. And then all of a sudden, you can do it in front of an auditorium. All of a sudden, you're like, oh, can you go present this at the client meeting next week? And then you'll work your way up. And then before you know it, you'll laugh that it was ever even a weakness. And then there's groups like Toastmasters and stuff like that, to just, which is a really safe group of people that are struggling with the same things you guys are. There's like that's just one example. So if you're not willing to go after your weaknesses and refine them and turn them into strengths, or at least to have them to the point that they're not a weakness and not holding you back, it will hamper you over the course of your career. You need to gain certain skills, like if you want to, and just being like, it's like math. Like people are like, oh, why do we learn math in school? And I'm like, well, everything's math. Your grocery bill's math. You're paying your bills is math. Buying your first car is math. Buying your house is math. Negotiation, which is another skill they don't teach in school. Buying your first car. I negotiated it. I got $6,000 off my first car. And I know people who bought full price. So you know what? Oh, this is another thing, just with the car thing. Don't worry if you hurt their feelings. Yeah. Don't be a dick or anything. Don't yell at them, or don't be like, so you ask for it. If you ask, you don't get. So when I was, when I was getting testimonies from my book, one of my old mentors, he's like a CEO now for another company. I kind of talked to him every 3 to 4 months. Anyway, I reached out to him and asked for a reference. I remember debating in my head. I was like, oh, I haven't talked to him in 3 months, and I'm asking him for something. And anyway, so I wrote a nice, polite email. It was really short notice. I asked him if he had time. He got back to me in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just say yes and they do it right away. Sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah.
But if you don't ask, you don't get. Like, that's a guaranteed no. So, if you don't negotiate for your mortgage for your house or these big bills like buying a car, like why are you, like, if their job is to sell you the vehicle, your job is to get you the best deal you can. If you don't ask, you're not going to get, and it actually hurts you. So no one likes negotiating. There are very few people. Yeah. It's a common thing. Like, no one likes confrontation or uncomfortable talks, but it's part of life. And the sooner you can like accept that it's part of life, part of the game, almost have fun with it. Because if he says no and I had to pay full price of the car, I probably wouldn't have bought it at that point. But that's a little bit of power in your hand. When you don't want something that badly, it puts you more in a driver's seat because you can negotiate tighter. But you just don't be too scared to offend the other person, because if you're really uncomfortable, like when I was in the field at a construction site, literally I had no females. So, you just can't be worried to offend. You can always apologize, but you need to keep your boundaries and you need to keep your line, right? And part of it's just a life lesson. So if you do mess up, or, maybe you're a little too aggressive in an argument, be the bigger person and go apologize to the person.
Yeah. So let me just kind of, April says closed mouths don't get fed. That's very, and Charlie said there's more math involved with art than he cares to admit. Kelsey,
it's in everything. It's a basic topic, right? I always say school needs to adapt and change, but they got to keep the basics. And unfortunately, guys, that's math.
Yeah, I mean, look, if a lot of kids like, they just don't pay attention to math, but it's like everything. It's
they need to adapt and make it more applicable. Like, why not teach critical debt in school? Like, teach them how compound interest can be like a benefit to you when it comes to like your retirement savings or your investment, but it also can be a hindrance when it's like applied to your credit card or your student loans. So like, that's basic math. Like, compound interest is not actually complicated math. So you could probably teach that in like grade 10, 11 when they're doing like their, like certain parts of their math. And I'm like, that's super applicable to the real world, but I don't know why they don't do that.
I mean, I learned compound interest, but again, it depends school by school.
I learned it in university when I took an elective course in economics.
Yeah, I learned it in, I think, geometry. Like,
we didn't. I didn't.
Yeah, so, all that.
That's really good to hear, because most people, maybe they changed it. I am older than you, but they don't.
I think it depends by school districts. You go to, I went to good school, and then, there's some people who I kind of see, and then they're like, wow, you didn't learn anything. It's kind of sad. I was part of Toastmasters, right? I'm still part of Toastmasters. I don't go to
it's a great program. I've never officially been in it, but I have sat through it to support friends on like different sessions. To be honest, I should take it, because now that I'm doing like speaking, like, so everyone hits a plateau. Like, again, so public speaking came super easy for me. So I never saw it as something I needed to work on. But as I got promoted and got to a certain level, it became no longer a strength. Now I'm kind of average. So because I'm at a higher level where everyone's really good at it. So like, that's what, like, sometimes your strengths are fantastic when you're like comparing yourself to like, my son, for example, is 1 year old and he has a vocabulary of like 10 words. So he's super advanced. But if we don't keep working with him, all the kids his same age in 6 months will be caught up to him, and he'll no longer be advanced, and he'll no longer have a wicked little skill. That's the same thing with me, right? Like, you kind of ignore certain things. You work on your I guess the things you're not naturally good at, and then all of a sudden it's hard ego wise when something you consider a core strength becomes kind of like, no, you need to like work on that. You talk way too fast, and I remember my very first keynote speech. I asked for some candid, I did it for free, and part of that was to get a testimony and to get some candid feedback, and it was amazing. My ego hurt a little bit after that. I was bruised for a good solid day, because I got more constructive feedback than I got good stuff. And so, but that's what I asked for. So I asked for it, and then I got it, and then I'm like, I didn't like it. But after the day of settleness came in, I realized what a gift it was, because it helped me tremendously in my next speaking engagement, and how to, there's no point if the audience doesn't get the lesson that you want them to get from it, then you failed. So you need to work on it, right? And that's everything. But yeah,
what's something you wished you worked on earlier on in your career?
My network. I got into business development corporately, and so I caught up with my network in that role. Probably moved me 10 years forward in my network ability career-wise. But to get into that role, I had to network, and I got into it 8 years into my career, where I could have done it at year 6 had I been smarter. But the big one is believing in myself. I wish. That's probably the biggest one if I had to pick one. I had an opportunity to run and own my own business when I was 20 years old. My brother and I applied to own a Tim Hortons. Do you have Tim Hortons down in the States? They're owned by. They're owned by.
Drive closer.
They're owned by Wendy's now, but at the time they weren't owned by Wendy's. They're one of a big Canadian franchise that got bought out by Wendy's.
I know Tim Hortons.
Yeah,
as I drive to Canada, I see more of them.
Okay, so they're like, I grew up in Ontario in the Toronto area, and that's like Canadian blood, man. Tim Hortons, Corey. Yeah, anyway, so my brother and I wanted to open a franchise at University of British Columbia where we were students, because then we had a Starbucks, and Starbucks coffee is quite a bit more expensive. It's also quite a bit stronger. So a lot of people prefer Tim Hortons coffee, which has a more milder taste. Anyway, long story short is we applied for it, and they were only worth $250,000 to buy a Tim Hortons franchise. In 2002 was $250,000. And so unfortunately, we didn't read the fine print. And when you apply, they pick the location for you. So we didn't get UBC. We got approved for a location out in Langley. And they already had that's where I actually grew up and went to high school. But they already had two or three. So we're like, forget that. So we walked away. A franchise now is worth like $3 million, $4 million. They're impossible to get. There's over 6 or 7 Tim Hortons in Langley. But I shared a flight one time on WestJet with all the owners in Western Canada of McDonald's. Yeah. And you can't actually own a franchise of McDonald's. You almost have to inherit it or wait till someone dies, because they're not giving up anything out. That's how valuable they are now. Anyway, so this fella started working at and he got it, and he owns 2 now. But what I learned from this conversation is, had I taken that franchise in Langley, which would have been profitable because none of them ever fail, and I was young, I would have worked the 80-hour weeks because I had my health and my youth. I actually can't work 80-hour weeks now. Like literally, it takes too much of my health. I have a kid too now. I just don't have the same time I had at 20 and the same energy, even though I'm healthy. Like you just age. Like life happens. If I had got that franchise, honestly, I probably could have applied 2 years after making it profitable for the location at UBC, because they eventually opened a location at UBC 6 years later. But again, I didn't believe in myself. I was thinking short-term, not long-term. And it's so easy to look in respect in hindsight. Everything's easier to look in respect. I could have been a multi-millionaire by now. And I would have done the work, because I've done the work. I've done 80-hour weeks in corporate business development, but I wasn't making $1 million. So anyway, I wish, so when I coach people, so life's this way. You got your health, your energy, and time when you're 20, but you got no experience. So, when you're 40, you got all the experience, but you don't have as much health and energy. You got way more commitments. Like, I can't just quit and open a side business that might fail now, because there's 2 people that depend on me. So you can, if that's your risk tolerance. Don't get me wrong, you can always do it, but it's just a little harder. You have more things to think about. When you're 20, most people, it's them or their business partner. They don't have aging parents they're taking care of. They don't usually have a gigantic student loan, or they just got a little bit more freedom. And I wish I used that a little bit more wisely. So for these 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds who are watching, get mentors. So the one thing I have seen with the younger generation that I don't like and I'm obviously stereotyping because there's exceptions, but I've seen quite a few of the young entrepreneurs do this. They stick with their own age bracket and don't think the baby boomers have anything to offer. And that is so arrogant and
you lose out
so
on a lot.
wrong. You're maybe talking to the wrong baby boomers, but the best mentor of my career was a baby boomer, and all he ever wanted to do was teach me everything he knew before he retired. Those are the baby boomers you want, or the older Gen X's. That's who you want to help you. Get them, recruit them, find them, because they will help you. You do not have the experience. So you can go out and learn the experience on your own and get up. If you're really resilient, good for you. But having those mentors will save you time and will save you from certain failures that can be prevented. Some failures can't be prevented, and that's part of your journey. But to be arrogant enough to think that because they didn't grow up with social media does not mean they don't know how to apply it. And, like, they know how to make things profitable because they've done it and they have failed doing it. So when I was putting my return on investment report, my very first one, I had older guys showing me how to do it. You know what? I've shown a lot of younger people how to put a proper return on investment reporter that's going to shareholders. There is a professionalism and a standard that needs to be met, and I don't expect you at 24 years old to understand what that standard is. That's why I'm here to help you. But these entrepreneurs who are like trying to like land big clients, there's a professionalism, like and some have it, but from what I've just seen this over and over. The people I've worked with that have pulled in the mentors are actually rare. I've seen it more the other way, which I think that's the biggest mistake I've seen with the younger generation of entrepreneurs.
I think it's a mistake a lot of people make, is like the concept of a mentor is foreign to a lot of people. And it's like getting a mentor. How do you do it? How do you navigate the space? It's not easy. So there are 4 Tim Hortons, and one of them is 10 minutes away. I think it's still open. And the other open one is like 40 minutes away, 40-minute drive, and the other 2 are like 30-ish minutes, but they're closed. So, but thank you. I didn't realize that. So I guess I'll when I'm really craving a donut, I'll kind of go out there.
Well, they're not as good anymore because they went complete process. They used to have every Tim Hortons used to have their own bakers and everyone, but then they went standardized. I guess because there's 1 or 2 really bad Tim Hortons. So unfortunately, they downgraded their product across the board.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Tim Hortons is pretty good. Now, it's another thing. So it's like mentorship. What's another thing that you so mentors, the network, the influencers, the just being open and understanding the environment. What's another thing that you see that is like super beneficial to like rising up?
I would add to maybe just choose their battles wisely and set goals and revisit. So goal setting and career development plans are always live documents. They are never done, ever. They need constant review, constant tweaks. So you need to resurface those. And that kind of leads into my next point is reflection. So some of your greatest lessons and greatest tools in life is you and your past. And so my book, Work Lessons 101, I wanted to write a book since I was a teenager. And I tried several times to write fiction books. But I just never finished. I just never could dedicate the time and the effort to them. And then 3 years ago, I kind of stumbled into writing a blog and started getting into nonfiction. And that's where it took off. That's what I enjoyed writing. And that's what I stuck to it. So I wrote a book, but you have to understand that book started from one of my reflection exercises I do. So when I came to this crossroads in my career and I was no longer fulfilled in certain parts of my career, so I decided to create that in another part of my life so I could feel fulfillment. How that idea for Work Lessons 101 came from reflecting on my journals. So many of these topics came from my personal journals I wrote early in my career. So when I moved out to our corporate headquarters, my journals went into a box and I forgot about them. And then I got into this crossroads and I was kind of depressed and sad and not knowing where to start. So I always kind of reflect, like, when did it start? When did I stop being fully fulfilled at work? Where did it start? And then I kind of, backstep and find out and isolate where it started. And so that's where I learned from my past. And what I did is there's something I did to like Did I go into the wrong department? When did I start? And so I decided to kind of learn a little bit about myself again as I pulled out my old journals and all my old resumes. And I started seeing some of the accomplishments I created over my career. And when I started reading my journals, I realized that I accurately recorded the first 6 years of my career, like down to like conversations I had with mentors, like life-changing conversations. And then I started realizing that like a lot of the mistakes that I saw other people make, like people laugh when they're like, well, dress code's common sense. And I'm like, yeah, dude, in my journal, there was like 6 incidents where people were sent home for not wearing the proper clothes, sent home without pay to not. So maybe one other, so reflection and learn how to make a good first impression, because it helps you. You know, if someone can remember you fondly, it's going to be easier to make a second impression. It's going to just be easier to get on their good side and to build them as an ally. So first impressions are really, really important. So if you can be prepared in advance, like when I've met some group presidents, I knew I was going to meet them at functions in advance. So I read their resumes, I went to their LinkedIn profile. I basically stalked them for a little bit, kind of figured out who they were and what they kind of valued. And then when I got introduced, my little elevated speech was completely targeted to impress them.
Yeah.
So older guys in my industry, I always slip in my site experience because it impressed them that a young female had the balls to go internationally into a third world and be the only female. It impresses them like up the, and they remember it too. Like, and so that's learn the skill to do that, be that, you know, and it comes, but you can learn how to make better impressions by learning how you blundered the first ones, right? Like there's a lot of people like do something and then they never think about it again. They just keep going forward. They never look back. And part of it is that we're kind of taught not to dwell on the past because it can cripple our present and future. And that's true. So if your past is no longer serving you, learn the lesson, move on and leave it. But if you don't reflect on your past ever, you're not going to learn the mistakes you made. So in my industry, our projects are huge. They can last 6 to 8 years. The chances of you being at the beginning of a project and finishing a project is slim to none. You'll get promoted before it ever finishes. So if you don't ever go back to figure out if your decisions you made on the project are wise, then you're just going to keep repeating these mistakes over and over again, never really learning the true lesson because you never inherited your mistake. So reflection is a powerful tool to become better and self-improve because you can learn what went wrong. And writing in journals, the technique that I learned, I like just seeing what I thought, how I thought when I was 22. Because I'm working with a lot of 22-year-olds. I have to recognize now 15 years later that I might not remember what it was like to be 22. And also the world's different now. So they have different challenges, especially with COVID and graduating college right now. I didn't have that problem. I graduated in one of the best economies in the world has ever seen in 2006. 2008, though, it collapsed. And I can assure you, I can teach you how I handled that. But these youngsters, so I think you just need to, you know, understand. So I like going back and reading kind of like how did I think when I was 22? Did I think about myself so much, or did I think of what others were thinking? Did I have a clue what a network was back then? Like, what did I write? And yeah, you can kind of see it. You know, I was pretty damn green. I remember being about 27, 28, and the new grads would come in. So just a few, and I was like always so hard on them. Now that I'm in my 30s and getting closer to my 40s, I'm like, I'm not hard on them at all. It's like, I'm just like, oh, I've been there. Like, oh my God, I've been there. And the world's harder now. Like the world's harder to buy your first home.
Yeah, so much harder.
Yeah, it's really the debt, and the Canadians don't have as expensive as the education issues the United States has, or the healthcare issues, because we have a different social system. But still, like, I don't know. I think you need to learn from where you went wrong. If you don't ever reflect on the past, just think of it as a dating relationship. You know, like people change, and if you don't change along with each other, you might not make it. So you need to reflect and talk to each other about your changes. People do not stay the same. And that's kind of awesome that they don't, really, if you think about it. I'm glad I don't think like a teenager anymore. I'm glad I went through it though, because it got me to where I am, but I'm glad I don't. But I need to understand, especially now being a mom, I need to understand the world and the youngsters and what type of world my son's going to grow into so I can be a better parent. So I can kind of, because a lot of people just teach what you know. Like, I think that's where the younger generation is like, well, I don't really want an older mentor because they don't have a clue. Like, they just think of like the baby boomer who can't like PDF a document or.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, you're kind of getting in the details. Who cares if they can't PDF a document? Doesn't mean they haven't read a zillion reports and can't tell you what to put in your report. They might not be able to format it and make it look beautiful, but because they've always had admins do that for them, because like that's what happens when you go up into the organization. You have people that work for you that do all that stuff. It's like you probably have like a virtual assistant.
Yeah.
Right. You know, like it gets to a point where you're like, oh, when I was just myself, I kind of had to do like everything, but I totally like forget now how to do like infographics, marketing. Like someone does that for me. So you're kind of like, oh, you're just like, you just forget. You got to put yourself in their positions too. But they know how to sell, and generally they do. And they know how to impress clients and they know how to climb the ladder because they did it. So yeah, the advice about, oh, just stop by the office and give your resume might be, yes, dated. But a lot of them aren't given that type of advice either. Those are like the exceptions I find. Most of the older people that I still work with are like, they understand how to do a project in the back of their hand. That's why they get paid so much.
No, so let's start to wrap up. Thank you, April. Thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Jay. Kenneth, he's still a badass at 62. Thank you, Charlie. Enjoy your pineapple on pizza. Thank you.
I'm not a Hawaiian pizza fan. Nope.
Yeah, me. I mean, look, I'll eat it. That's not my first choice.
It's like the one pizza I won't eat. It's like because it goes into like the crust and the cheese.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I completely understand. So, any sort of final thoughts before we and we'll definitely do this again.
Yeah, it was super fun. I just wanted to go on. Obviously, let people know about my book if they find value in it, or if they, because actually quite a few people have bought it and told me they got it from their grandkids.
Nice. Okay,
because it's one of those things that it's definitely useful at any stage in your career. But if you can learn some of this stuff before you get into the door or you're early in your career, it will just help you and save you from making some of the common mistakes that inexperience gets you.
Yeah.
So, I don't expect, because as I said, school doesn't prepare you for the practical work environment. They teach you theory, but theory by itself doesn't work in an environment that requires you to be practical. So that level of common sense and practicality, so many people learn, and so many people learn the hard way. So if you can avoid some of the common mistakes or prepare in advance for them, or know how to better prepare for them, which I think my book really honestly helps you with, as I said, it hits like every topic, right? So it gives you kind of the part of the reason I put it together and released it was, some of my clients just don't have the money to pay me to individually solve their problems. And so this is kind of, I would say, the Bible. So you can read it front to back, or you can read the chapters that are applicable to the career you're at this point. If you're having an issue about how to pick your battles wisely, or you have an issue on how to build a network, there's chapters on those topics in the book. The table of contents is on my website, worklessons101.com. So you can go visit it to check it out before you purchase it, if it is something that you would want. But it's definitely something you can also read front to back, or put on the shelf and read things as they become applicable. Because it's kind of like that kind of go-to Bible-ish thing where you're just like, oh, wait a minute, I read this, but I forgot. And each chapter is not terribly long, so you can read it quickly and kind of get the advice. And it might be able to target you. Like career development plan, I would say you should start to put it in your last year of university. Kind of what you want, what organization, industries you want to start targeting. You really should be thinking about that during your degree. And especially right now when there's high unemployment, you have to be willing to go that extra mile and be a little bit more prepared, because you need to differentiate yourself. That's another thing, differentiate yourself and learn how to do that. That's making the first impression, but being prepared, going into your interview, knowing everything, having prepared questions in advance, and knocking out standard questions out of the park because you have rehearsed answers and you know how to deliver them. That's the extra mile. Most people don't ever put that type of effort into their career, and they're shocked that they're not successful in the long run. So that's why I always call my book kind of like a mentor book to help you launch a career.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much for your time, Sabrina. It was a pleasure talking with
Thanks
you.
for having
do
me.
this again. And I look forward. I think I put a copy. I put it in the comments, the Amazon link. So feel free to, if you want to buy it. it's definitely a good purchase, and it's just one of those things that navigating your career and being strategic about it just really makes just a big difference in salary, makes a big difference in career development, and just happiness too. Just having control over your career allows you to go in directions
Another
that,
thing gives you control. You hold the
yeah,
hands and you're driving the car in the direction you want, right? When you have a plan and goals, you're going in that right direction. Yeah, the ebook's available July 22nd, and the paper book is available now.
yeah. All right, cool. So thank you. You have a good one. Enjoy.
Awesome. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
No problem. Bye-bye.